Pronto. Bem-vindos e bom dia a todos. Obrigado aí por nos acompanhar em mais um evento do Simplified Brasil. Dessa vez, um evento verdadeiramente internacional dentro do nosso capítulo, em função tanto dos convidados, como também de alguns dos convidados palestrantes, né, como alguns convidados para assistir nossa reunião, nossa sessão, que provavelmente comecem a entrar em breve, se é que já não entraram. Mas, mais uma vez, eu gostaria de agradecer a todo mundo por essa presença e, em função da particularidade também desse evento, né? Porque ele tem a ver com das promessas e das propostas desse grupo e do Escorai no geral, que é o de tentar multiplicar colaborações e projetos em conjunto e, dessa forma, de forma sinérgica, poder avançar conhecimento e debates em torno de temas relevantes, né? Então, hoje, o foco principal da nossa reunião vai ser os conteúdos do livro Sustainable Lifestyles After COVID-19, que foi justamente uma iniciativa coletiva que arrancou ano passado a partir do próprio congresso da Escorai, e que foi amadurecendo enquanto estávamos vivendo, né, a pandemia, e eu, inclusive, tive a oportunidade para esse grupo de apresentar alguns conteúdos. Por isso que também hoje eu não vou estar em qualidade de apresentador, apenas de coordenador, e se acompanhando cada uma das apresentações, dando apoio para as apresentações. Gostaria então colocar rapidinho o contexto, né, a referência desse encontro, né? E aí, inclusive, a capa do livro, que hoje chegou para a Valerie, antes de ontem para o Filipe, ainda não chegou no Brasil, nem na China, mas estamos bem contentes de que esteja acontecendo, né? Como que a gente vai seguir? Eu vou estar apresentando, então, cada um dos três palestrantes e pedindo para fazer na sequência cada apresentação, e posteriormente a gente faz a sessão de perguntas e respostas. Tem a função de levantar a mão para algumas perguntas. Eu vou listando a ordem na qual as pessoas vão querendo fazer perguntas, para, uma vez terminada a última apresentação, entramos nessa sessão de perguntas e respostas. Mas também tem o chat, se quiserem comunicar as perguntas pelo chat, eu vou aqui registrando a ordem e depois eu começo com essas perguntas do chat na nossa sessão de Q&A, de questions and answers. Aqueles que precisem, como falamos, as apresentações vão ser em inglês, né? Então, aqueles que queiram se expressar em português, para fazer as suas perguntas, não tem nenhum problema. Eu vou fazer uma breve tradução da pergunta, não vou estar fazendo a tradução da resposta, que vai ser naturalmente em inglês. Então, isso, sem mais delongas, eu gostaria de apresentar nossos três apresentadores, né, palestrantes. O Philip Vergraat é professor emérito da Universidade Técnica de Delft, na Holanda, e pesquisador professor na Clark University, nos Estados Unidos. Ele foi um dos fundadores do Escorai, inícios da década passada, e hoje também é ativista em temas climáticos na cidade de Newton, Massachusetts, onde ele reside boa parte do ano, nos Estados Unidos. Ele vai ser o primeiro apresentador, justamente para poder fornecer um marco mais conceitual e colocar em contexto como que os desafios vinculados com o Covid dialogam com a agenda de sustentabilidade no geral e mudança climática em particular. Na sequência, vamos ouvir a Valerie Bracchia. Ela é pesquisadora associada no Instituto de Jerusalém de Pesquisa sobre Políticas Públicas. Ela é palestrante também em temas de sustentabilidade e ciências ambientais na Universidade de Tel Aviv, em Israel, e foi vice-diretora-geral do Ministério de Proteção Ambiental em Israel. E também vamos ouvir Lei Sang, Lei Sang, que é professora associada na Escola de Meio Ambiente e Recursos Naturais da Renmin University, em Beijing, China, e coordena desde 2014 o capítulo chinês da Escorai. A Valerie também é coordenadora do capítulo de Israel da Escorai. So, guys, I'll thank you, Philip, Valerie, Lei, for being with us and your willingness to share your experience and your main thoughts about this research project that we initiated at the beginning informally, then more formally into a book about the impact of COVID over different dimensions relevant to the sustainability debate. I briefly introduced each of you already, and we can start with Philip's presentation. Then we'll go to Valerie's presentations, and then to Lei's presentation. After that, we will have a Q&A session, and in the meantime, we may collect some of comments or observations of questions through the chat function. So, Philip,
Thank you, Fabian. Hello, everybody. It's very nice to see you all. This was such an interesting project between the four of us. You know, coming from all over the globe, coming together. It started very differently. It started as a meeting of global SCORAI, and then suddenly this book came out of it. What a process this was. And it is not finished yet, because maybe Fabian will talk a little bit later about it. We are planning some follow-up activities also after the publication of this book. Can I have the first slide, please?
Sure. Let me share screen. There we go.
Basically, we start with chapter 7, which may look a little bit illogical, but the title of this chapter is called COVID-19 Open the Door for Sustainable Consumption and Lifestyles. And that's something that you are already very familiar with, so I will not spend too much time on it. So the next slide, please. Next. I have to move the picture away a little bit. So unsustainable consumption is really a very difficult problem, as we all know. And it has all kinds of unwanted consequences like climate change. And suddenly we had COVID-19, and what we saw was a sudden disruption of very deeply entrenched consumption practices. And the book is going all about the trends, the disrupted trends, new trends that were emerging, etc. And what we saw happening was suddenly there was a decrease of as much as 14% of greenhouse gas emissions because of less transportation, less flying, and many other things that did not happen. Of course, this is not the way we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but what it showed was that you really can change behavior if the need is there. So there was a massive behavioral change underway. The question, of course, is how much is it temporary, how much will remain? And what we see is that the greenhouse gas emissions very quickly came back when the crisis was easing. So the question is, did we miss an opportunity for this, after this disruption of lifestyles, to make these changes more permanent? Can I have the next slide, please? So very quickly about unsustainable consumption and climate change. So 70% of greenhouse gases are directly generated by households. I'm talking about the highly developed countries here. As we all know, transportation, housing, and electricity use, also food, consumer products, flying, etc., all contribute to those greenhouse gas emissions. What we often forget is that many of the products that we use have embodied energy. What means that they are actually produced somewhere else, very often in China or in East Asia, and then consumed in Europe or in America. And very often the greenhouse gas emissions associated with these products are allocated to China rather than to the US. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's an illustration of many consumer products. You see, for instance, this nice furniture there, but it is probably produced in China, and all the greenhouse gas emissions necessary for producing it are counted up to China's greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. So how is it possible to change consumption practices? So first of all, most people don't see the connection between their own consumption patterns and climate change and other environmental problems. So we really need to drastically reduce our overconsumption. But consumption is very heavily entrenched in the economy and in the culture. So economy, we need production in order to, we need consumption in order to have production. It creates jobs, etc. You cannot, if you stop consuming, there is an economic crisis, as we actually saw last year during the COVID crisis. And the culture, I will come back to it, consumption is a highly cultural activity. Also, the power relationships are very heavily with the big multinational corporations. And in other words, consumption is very heavily entrenched. The rich and mighty consume the most and also control the present economic system. So how do you reduce consumption? You have to address these things. COVID-19 has shown that changing lifestyle is possible. Next slide, please. So I will go a little bit back in history. What the point I like to make here is that consumer society can be changed because consumer society is a social construct. It was purposefully created in America and later in Europe and in other places around the world. In America, there was a tremendous industrial overcapacity. That overcapacity from war goods was redirected towards consumer goods. For these consumer goods, you needed to create demand. And so the suburbs and exurbs were created, enabled by the automobile, and furnished and created this materialization of American dream, but basically it created a consumer society. Next slide, please. So if I go a little bit further back, you can see through these citations that already in the 1920s, people were actively thinking about how can we manipulate people's desires. So if we can sell anything if we can give people a good feeling or a sexy feeling about it, from toothpaste to cigarettes to cars and houses. So we need to shift America from a needs culture to a desires culture. And this is a citation by Edward Bernays, who was the creator of modern marketing and advertisement. And a little bit later, in 1955, Victor Lebow said, we need to make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction and our ego satisfaction in consumption. So consumption is not just needs fulfillment, but it is all these spiritual satisfaction. Next slide, please. So, how to change overconsumption and how to move towards sustainable consumption. So here I quickly summarize something that is not so much in the book explicitly. You have really to differentiate between policies for different classes of people. So for the middle class, I put up a number of policies like universal basic services, shortening of the working week, and basically less expendable income for individual consumption. For the upper class, we need to really tax them steeply. And for low income groups, it's not so much of giving them more money to enable them to consume more, but more about free education, affordable housing, low cost health, child and elderly care, financial safety net. And I also put up a few more policies like laws curtailing advertisements and a few others. Next slide, please. So I'm nearly coming to the end. So can we imagine a post-COVID-19 transition to sustainable lifestyles? So COVID-19 changed a lot, and my colleagues will talk more about that. Working and schooling from home, less traveling, more outdoor recreation, less eating outdoors, etc., etc. Many of these changes reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Many will not persist, but some will persist, especially remote working and meeting, and maybe recreation closer to home and less far away holidays. So our best opportunity, I think, and maybe Lei will talk a little bit more about that, is green recovery politics, investing in infrastructure to create, for instance, green transportation infrastructure, public transit, high-speed trains, and the proximity of home, work, and school. Valerie will talk a little bit about that. If we invest deeply in green infrastructure, we will try to lock in these alternative behaviors that we saw during COVID-19 and make less greenhouse gas emissions as a possibility to persist. And by this, I think one more slide is my last slide. Yes, thank you. And this is my email address if you want to reach me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Philip, for your wonderful way to laying out the sort of questions that the big questions that we were trying to address with the discussion in the book. And I'll now handle to Valerie the time for bringing two of the domains or aspects that we focus in the book related to what happens at the home level and at the city level. Valerie?
Are you putting on the screen share?
Sure, let me open your presentation.
Okay, delighted to be with everybody. Very exciting to be with everybody.
And now let me share. One second, please. There you go. Can you
Okay,
see?
so I looked at what are the implications for the home, the neighborhood, and the city, and what is the COVID-19 likely to change in the way we live. Next slide. If we should remember or look back to what was happening before COVID-19 disrupted the way we were living, there were definitely those unsustainable trends that Philip has recalled, and we were living beyond the planet's planetary boundaries. But if I look at urban trends, pre-COVID-19, there were some indications of more sustainable urban trends. We were seeing revitalization of the urban centers. We were seeing a higher density of building and a more use of public transport. We were seeing that people were enjoying life on the streets, outdoors, cafes, bars, entertainment on the street life. And a lot of young people were living or coming into the city centers, and there was a lively scene, and they were looking for experiences rather than material possessions. And in that way, what happened pre-COVID-19 in terms of the urban trends was indicating that we could get to a more sustainable city life. Next slide. The COVID-19 disrupted those trends. So what we had seen as city life on the streets, as young people in the centers, as using public transport, and that was disrupted. Everybody was inside their home. People stopped using public transport and they haven't gone back to it. We weren't out in the cafes and drinking and out on the streets and gathering together and enjoying ourselves. There was a lower level of shopping, that's true, but the city centers and the streets were empty, were not active at all. And a lot of the young people, they not only lost their jobs, they had to give up their place of living, give up their life. And quite a number of them went to live in their parents' homes. Next, thank you. What did we perceive was happening when we look at what the developers were proposing? And I come from land use planning and real estate, and so I was looking at what was happening in the ways in which we were using and changing in relation to land use, building, and development. And the developers caught on pretty quickly and realized people were not happy with what they had inside their apartments. And those who had moved into the centers of town to be where the activity was happening, having experiences, found themselves closed in to small properties, to small homes, and which did not have sufficient space, which did not open out into any kind of open balcony or garden or patio or courtyard. And they realized, the developers realized very quickly that what they needed to offer was for people to move. And they were identifying people wanted a balcony, and balconies became an important feature in COVID-19. They were previously, perhaps people had closed in balconies to get more internal space, but now they wanted the balconies to have external space, contact with the outside, contact with other people across the balconies. People wanted a private garden, wanted to be able to be outside, wanted the space inside, the living space inside for more activities, and wanted a garden space outside. So developers were proposing that they moved to different properties. Next slide. What was happening in the office development, office real estate, was a reduction, and offices were abandoned. Offices were empty. People didn't go in. We didn't need the meeting rooms. We were Zooming. We didn't go in for parking. We don't need it. The co-working hubs like WeWork, people didn't want to sit together. They worked from where they were safer. They worked from their homes. They didn't want to go into the co-working hubs. So we landed up in COVID era, and it's continuing, with office space that is empty, and with a question, what do we do with it? And in the land use planning profession and real estate property, we're now seeing that they're talking of rezoning office space and bringing people back into the center and combining office and residential. The simplified impacts of this is that we had previously urbanity, but now we see we'll have more localization inside where we live and how we live. And people moved out, and the central business district in the center lost activity. Next slide. So what can we do about that if we look at what we really want as sustainable? We want the city to be lively and not have people moving out. The main thing of homes and buildings is we must get them into multiple use, adaptable, flexible, so that the activities can take place during the day for multiple people of all activities in a household, all space able to be used by day, by evening, by night, in all different kinds of ways. And we need to provide better ventilation and circulation systems. Next slide. What we do see is that people are in and around their communities, their neighborhoods. And one of the concepts which accelerated hugely during the COVID was to think about the neighborhood and a local area as being where we want to live. And there had previously been ideas in that direction of the 15-minute city by Carlos Moreno, and which was adopted by the mayor of Paris. And we are now talking more and more about living a local life in and around a neighborhood in a 15-minute city. Next slide. So what we were likely to see in that case is that people are not going to be moving from residential suburbs into the central city each morning and then out again in the evenings. What we're likely to find is that we will have dispersed decentralization, multiple centers, neighborhoods. Each neighborhood will have a center. Each area and a rural area, a small town, they may be high quality neighborhoods, more affordable housing, and they may be very much decentralized. So we will have a polycentral situation, not going as star-shaped, going into one major city center. Next slide. That has implications for mobility. Now, what we are seeing just at the moment is a very unsustainable situation. We're seeing that with the loss of public transport, we're seeing a mass increase in the use of private cars with increased congestion. And here in Israel, where the vaccination is operating so that we are living more or less full lifestyles, we have a huge increase in traffic congestion and private cars. What we saw during COVID-19 that was very sustainable was that we got decentralized activity with a lot of cycling, a lot of cycle paths, more walking, and there's opportunities for developing micro mobility so that we don't have to take the car, so that we don't have to use roads and parking spaces. So perhaps we can have the roads and the parking spaces reduced and use micro-mobility to enjoy those 15-minute neighborhoods. And the second issue of sustainable is that as people move to use digital networks, digital highways became more important than physical highways, and digital replaced physical. That has very great significance for what we should do to hold the sustainable activities that we, trends that we got during COVID-19. Next slide. So what will our post-COVID lifestyle be like? Well, digital replace physical. That's a major issue that we should progress. Keep down the commuter journeys. Keep down the need for business flights. We can use digital connections to keep those down. We can provide and strengthen this local neighborhood services and the idea of universal basic services you already heard from Philip. Next slide. And what we shouldn't do, or what we should take steps to prevent going on further, are those activities which could then lead us away from the sustainable. So we have to somehow barrier against what may be leading to unsustainable. Many governments, including here, are promoting personal expenditure to revive the economy. That is not going to provide us with a more sustainable consumer situation. That is going to take us back again to reviving the economy through consumer society. What we need to cope with is how we cope with transport and get people back onto public transport. And as far as possible, not encourage a move to larger homes and out of town. Next slide. So finally, what are the policies that we should be looking for a more sustainable normal? Well, broadband. Why isn't it a public service? Why are physical highways a public service, but digital highways are not a public service? That broadband should be a public service so that everybody has the opportunity to using the digital opportunities. The remote working has great advantages and enables us to work in a home environment close to the neighborhood level. We should get it going, we should encourage it, and encourage the public sector to go to remote working. We don't need a land use separation any longer between residential and employment. We need to bring the residential back into the city centers. Now there's an opportunity for that. Decentralized to enable the micro mobility within the neighborhoods, and strengthen neighborhoods and their organizational structures. I do hope we will see those kind of policies coming through in the governments and in international discussion. Thank you very much.
Great job, Valerie. I think that those trends occurring at so many different levels are still being felt and are part of our reality, even for this specific group of researchers and practitioners. So I certainly raise the questions that we all have in mind at every day. The same way that Solange asked and invite, please feel free to use the chat function for raising questions. Não esqueçam de já ir pensando algumas dúvidas ou perguntas que tiverem e podem colocar no chat ou esperar uma vez finalizar a última apresentação para formulá-las. Now we go to the last presentation that will be run by Lei, focused on how communities reacted to to COVID-19, and the policy set that was applied, particularly in China, to cope with such a challenge and the repercussions it had across all the other contexts that raise questions about the possibility of for example, of a Green New Deal. Lei, I'll hand it to you, and I will open your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Fabian. Really my pleasure to talk to colleagues from Brazil. Greetings from Beijing. Yeah, when the book was finished, actually, I really start thinking towards future. If we really write a kind of reflection on the process of writing the book, I think it will be equally interesting. Because all the time we are trying to clarify to each other the concepts and terms or frameworks we are using, and especially when it comes to concepts like community or state regime or this kind of things. Very interesting. But here I only have 10 minutes, so I will focus on the topics covered mainly in chapter 5 and 8 in the book. So talking about the role of the government and community during the battle against the COVID-19 and also afterwards. Okay, next please. So basically we are looking at if we want to manage or enable a kind of transition to what's more sustainable lifestyle, what can the state do, and also what kind of life social practice can be changed or organized around communities in cities and villages. Next, please. Okay, I'm not going to explain everything in this framework, but actually I want to show that it applies to the situation in China when we're talking about the state, but also it's possible to apply it, especially when it goes to kind of comparative studies between different countries for different purposes. Here, very important to see a kind of policy responses from the government in any countries. Of course, making policies and implementing those policies are their business. But this kind of thing, practices have been changing. At least in China, we have seen this kind of evolution of policies and the whole changing trends of policy making process. But to understand this kind of change, you have to understand what kind of institutional changes have been taking place in parallel. So this kind of institutional changes can be delivered at different levels, from the highest level, for example, informal institutions, those traditions, culture, or political ideology in different countries, but also formal institutions like your political systems or kind of property rights, regulations, and also the way you implement those things. So we are talking about those governing mechanisms. But all these kind of things at different layers of the society have been changing very fast in China. So here I'm talking about what the state did during the battle against COVID-19, and also what they are going to play the role for the economic recovery right now. Okay, next please. Actually, this question, many have been trying to answer this question now. How sustainable will our recovery be? Because many governments are busy trying to recover their economy. But here, if you look at the database from OECD, I just checked recently, based on the collection of policy measures from more than 40 countries, so basically OECD member countries and their partner countries, you see that they categorized all kinds of policy measures and also calculate how many goes to those policy areas with positive impact, environmental impacts. So if you look at the percentage, it's really very minor. That means right now, most of the recovery policies are not really green. Okay, next please. And here also explains where, what are the priority areas in which those policies were introduced. So basically focusing on grants or loans, also kind of greening transportation infrastructures, and also basically goes to climate change mitigation, but issues like biodiversity, water actually poorly addressed. Okay, next one. But when it comes to China, we see another kind of trends or picture. For example, this picture shows that over the years from 2000 to 2015, if I update this figure, then you will see the similar trends even faster. So that means in terms of consumption, all the time, consumption has been increasing from both rural population and urban population, and the gap between the rural and urban still been narrowing down. That means increasing consumption, of course, is not always a good news, yeah? But okay, next one. And here, this is a really newly released statistics showing that for the first quarter of this year, yeah, already from last April, basically from May, we see all kinds of going up. But here, if you compare this kind of growth rate for GDP and also for retail sales, the growth rate is really very, many people are celebrating this kind of increase. But of course, we have to see what will be the environmental impacts if we continue increase like this. Okay, next one. And in OECD database, you can search for any of these countries, what kind of policy measures. So it's very hard to read, but I can show you that this is even not the end of the list. That means they collected many those policies in China with the purpose to recover our economy, but also trying to enable a kind of transitions. But because I cannot really judge for other countries, but if I see this kind of list, it's really not exclusive, because in China, we don't really have a new green package. But most of these national policies they are talking about, so this kind of green objectives are embedded in most of the policy documents. For example, in March, we just released the 14th five-year planning. So you can imagine if this kind of national strategic document set that goals for carbon reduction, for example, for renewable energy, for example, that means in China, all the provinces at that level will make their own local policies to implement this kind of national policies. Then all the sectors, major sectors, will have to react with their own plans. So I don't really see this kind of list really cover all these kind of green policies in China. Okay, next one. Okay, it's on the other hand, all these kind of policies will be implemented at very local level. So for the issue we are focusing this book, so kind of lifestyle change or consumption, sustainable consumption, actually I see the very important role of communities. And in this figure, you see that compare several cities, from major cities like Wuhan or Beijing, but also smaller cities like Zibo, Wuhu, or Shenzhen. So they compared during last January to April. So basically that was the period for lockdown in China. So basically it lasted for 76 days in China. Officially, we come to the 0 cases. So you see the effectiveness of those control measures are really very highly coefficient with those measures taking place at the community levels. So if the community really organized and communicated with their members and really strictly enforced those measures, then you see immediately the effect on COVID-19 control. So it shows directly that community are at the front line of the battle against COVID-19. They are very important, but I'm going to explain a little bit how it was possible. Okay, next one, please. I know everybody are talking about the communities, but here in China, it was organized a little bit different. To give you a kind of idea how city lives are organized around communities. Here you see the map of Beijing, and right in the middle of the city, maybe you are familiar with Forbidden City. So Forbidden City looks basically like the biggest courtyard in the city. So where in the old time emperors were living there, yeah. So the other parts of the city actually organized in similar ways, but much smaller kind of communities. So you see in this map, all these blue dots are one of the communities. So it was spread everywhere. And the most important thing is from the very top level, from the municipal government to community level, you have very efficient vertical communication channels. Okay, next one, please. That means in each of the communities, you see this kind of branch organizations from the government. So any policy measures introduced by the municipal government will be immediately communicated to the community level, and those workers or officials at this level will immediately act together with other actors or organizations or individuals at this level. So all the time we see communities become very important unit for city governance. Although even before COVID-19, China has been working on a kind of program called community revitalization already for more than 10 years. But this time, this was tested during COVID-19, and everybody realized it was very important, and the role of communities will be enhanced and the capacity will be improved even further, because we know in future we have to face even more severe challenges and difficulties. So city, if for the civilians, then we have to really build up the community capacities. And in this picture, you see all kinds of actors active at community level. This lady is just a kind of individual, but she has been practicing all kinds of low carbon life. And this actually, she rebuilt her house and using solar panels for energy, and also grow organic vegetables. So become basically a kind of demonstration household to demonstrate different lifestyles. Also for education, a kind of environmental education for school children. And also they are organizing online and offline activities, even between different communities for exchange of experiences. Next one, please. And this picture shows the change right after the COVID-19 in Beijing. In one of the communities, it was very old and poorly infrastructured community, but within 1 year during the lockdown period, they worked on their community, really renovated everything. So you see now they have on the top of the building roof, they have a community garden, basically maintained with volunteers from the community, and also organized many weekend activities for free for children for environmental education. Next one, please. And also this kind of community supported gardens become very important places for children entertainment. So these children used to spend their weekends in the center of the city for shopping malls, indoor activities, but now they really start to enjoy open air activities and working on the farm. Next one, please. And this one shows during the lockdown period how this lady managed to get shopping done with her bike together with these rolling bags, yeah, because she's not able to drive, and actually she has problem with the knees. But only one family can only have one person going out of the community 2 times per week for shopping during that period. So very strict. So she managed to do it. But also she told me that she started to think what would be more important in life. For example, actually she is taking care of the grandson, and she used to be very strict with the boy, all kinds of training courses. But then she started to think maybe this is not the most important thing. So re-educate herself for the idea of children education even. Okay, next one, please. And in the same community, you see now they have a new central park with a kind of theme park for waste sorting. So immediately last May, when Beijing started to enforce waste sorting at community, and this community become a demonstration project. So many people come to visit them, even international students in Beijing. This was actually taking place last week. This group of international students coming mainly from African countries, they come to this community to learn how people build on themselves, I mean, with volunteers, this kind of infrastructure, and also a lot of activities, how it was organized. So we are seeing multifunctional community life. Next one, please. And here you see the introduction of new technologies and new waste sorting systems in the communities, also online and offline. So we see the power of kind of digital platforms driven urban governance is taking place. Yeah, each one works based on different incentives, but I don't have time to go into the details. But basically, they belong to digital platform driven urban governance ideas. Okay, next one, please. And this will also take place in communities. For example, this company were trying to promote all kinds of green packaging materials. And when they see residents have to separate chicken waste for kitchen waste, so using plastic bags, so that's not good. So they're trying to promote this bags can be reused for many, many times. But the interesting thing is many people found these green bags, yeah, were very fashionable. They actually explore the functions of these bags and carrying this to supermarkets, to farms. So kind of, I'll say, very innovative use of the same products. Okay, next one, please. I think that's it. Okay. 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 I think this is what I can say within 10 minutes. But still many other interesting ideas, because at the moment we finish that book, actually many things have been changing. Sometimes you see those trends talked by Phillips and Valerie, and actually most can be observed in China, but at different scales, at different to different extent, but in some cases even in different directions. For example, housing, sharing economy, a kind of public transportation systems, this kind of things actually are coming back, even retained in a new way. So that will survive. For example, shared biking. So actually we are really jump into another system, and continue to promote this kind of sharing economy. So it's not gone. And housing is another story in big cities, of course. So people are not really going for outside of city or bigger house. So all kinds of directions. But one thing is digitalization is very, very strong and powerful trends. We really have no idea how it will bring us to. Okay, back to you.
Thank you very much, Lei. Very interesting presentation on how communities were functional to address the challenges of COVID and showing some initiatives that may inspire other contexts or may help us to interpret actions and policies taking place in our context within a broader picture. Bom, já tivemos então as 3 apresentações. Tem bastante atividades no chat de observações ou perguntas. Então, eu passaria agora diretamente para a sessão de perguntas e respostas, até porque temos mais uns 25 minutos no máximo, né? Conforme o tempo combinado. E eu começaria, então, mencionando aquelas perguntas, observações que foram colocadas no chat. What I was saying is that there's been quite an interesting exchange of comments and observations and questions within the chat. So most of them are in English, I guess. So I don't know if you guys had a chance to read it, but let me briefly summarize them. Adriana mentioned that it was a very interesting topic, the one that Valerie brought, related to changes at the housing level, but want some comments about how persistent those changes will be, which in a way relates to the other comments. Solange more broadly questioned to what extent these tendencies are confirmed or defied, and that works for the 3 of the presenters, Valerie, Philip, and Lei. Danilo made 3 different questions with social isolation at homes and the consequences such as feeling lack of social contact, illnesses, stress, problems trying to cope with different functions within home. So to what extent the staying at home solve the problem of overconsumption that Philip very clearly addressed as a challenge for climate change, and particularly bearing in mind populous countries like Brazil, where houses is small and the number of people within the home is very high, large extended families, and whether it is possible to reduce society consumption without changing more broadly people's lifestyles. And lastly, to what extent a clean energy model will help to either supplement or offset the need for deeper changes in personal lifestyles. I think, and then I have another comment by Eloisa. In Brazil, we are living a context different from most countries. Currently, we are facing the worst phase of the pandemic. So what do you suggest for us considering in terms of coping in a sustainable manner with the current health crisis? Those are the questions at the chat. I think we have a good base for launching the discussion, and whoever else want to ask a question, please raise your hand. Vamos começar com essas perguntas, e aqueles que tiverem outras observações ou perguntas, fiquem à vontade ou para comunicá-las por chat ou levantar a mão e se expressar verbalmente. So back to the presenters. Anyone in particular that wants to begin? Valerie, yes.
Yeah, I was very happy to see the comments and the questions, and indeed, and their differences at the moment. There are considerable differences between countries depending on what stage and what condition they're in. We're obviously not going to go back to what was before. If we're talking about digitalization, localization, decentralization, they're accelerated trends, they're going to stay. How do we cope with them? That's a question which can take us to more sustainable or less sustainable. But those three trends are here and they're going to stay, and whether however soon or later countries get over the health aspect of it. I wanted to say that the experience here, I don't know, Fabian, if the group has already heard your scenarios, but Fabian said, are they going to go back to being overconsumption? Are they going to look for social connectivity? I can say from here, being a country which has got to the stage because of the vaccinations, not because people behaved well, they did not observe and did not comply with, as has been described to us by Lei, they're a non-compliant society here. But the vaccinations have just changed the situation completely, and everything has opened up. What did people want? People wanted other people, the social divers. Did you call them social diving, Fabian? Mm-hmm. People want to be with family. People want to be with people. People want to be with friends. People want to be in things that happen. People went back to restaurants, to bars, to cafes, to places where they can see people, be with people, go out with people. People wanted people. They have not gone back to consuming, purchasing an enormous amount of goods. But the social diving, and I think if I would guess, Israeli society in some way similar to Brazilian society, they want family, they want people, they want friends, they want to feel they're doing things with people. So that is the main, was the main issue here. It is the cultural side, the museums opened up, and so on. The prices of real estate, what has happened? The prices of housing have gone up and they're going up. People are looking for more housing. They are moving out from the centers. They are, those who saved money or had high income, they are looking to improve their income. And quite a number are being digital nomads and moving out away from where the employer is. And that is going to be of significance. Remote working is here to stay. The workers want remote working. Not all of the employers are willing and want to get the people back into the office because they're frightened of losing their good workers. So they want them to come back to be connected to the company and not lose them. But the workers want to be home. Over 50% of the US workforce is remote working. That is significant. Here we're a high-tech, a very dominantly high-tech. They're remote working, they maintain their income, and they save money, and they want to have a good time. So remote working is here to stay. Prices of real estate, housing is going up. Offices have gone down by 6%, and they're going to be down. Shopping is going to stay online for sure, definitely in part. Education was a total failure. Schools went back, the kids suffered. Zoom was not satisfactory. Universities are trying to go back. Education online didn't work. I looked at figures in March 2021 from Ipsos Mori and from Gallup, and they showed that the same trends that we had identified are carrying on, and people are not necessarily thinking of going back. They are going on. And if you're saying, what should we do in a situation where we're still in the COVID, recognize that we're not going back, reinvent, take it as an opportunity, disruption, it's innovative disruption, see where it's going to take us to the future. Don't look back to what we've lost in the past.
Thank you, Valerie. Lei or Philip, you want to add something?
Can I follow up on Valerie? I want to push back a little bit to what Valerie said. So in terms of deep diving into sociality, what I see that young people are moving quickly back into very social lifestyles. But I also see a hesitation in the older generation. People are sort of shy, even if they are fully vaccinated. In the US, they are still, and also in the Netherlands, they are still are very careful. So, and the same with trends like remote working. So what you see in the US is that people tend to go back to the office 2-3 days a week, not full time, but also not completely stay at home. They do want to be connected to the workplace. So we see a partial going back, but also partially trends to stay. Who knows? There was a very interesting question by Danilo. Basically, if I summarize, can we have reduction in consumption without changing our lifestyles? I don't know the answer, but many people think that by adopting renewable energy, renewable electricity, electrifying our homes and our transportation, and that we can get to zero emissions. My answer is a little bit more nuanced. So technology cannot change everything, because even if we have electric transportation, we still need to push people to buy an electric car, or better, an electric bicycle. And even if we can provide heating and cooling by electricity rather than by oil and gas and coal, we still need to induce people to change their houses and change their heating and cooling system in their houses. So it is very much a combination of technology and individual decisions by homeowners and vehicle owners. And the same about faraway holidays. So what we do see is that people can enjoy themselves very much locally, biking and walking and skiing and so on, and not going very far from their houses. But who knows? On the other hand, we see that the flights are getting full again, and that people try to get out on long distance holidays. So if you look at the calculations and the scenarios from many reports that I see around it, most say that you can get to zero emissions by partially by technology, but we really need to look at our lifestyles and our consumption patterns, because personally I'm convinced that technology is not going to get us there in time. So Danilo, I don't see you, but I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Okay, I feel what I can see here is, pandemic caused many changes, but few we just disappear. I see they diversified things, lifestyles. And it's very important at this moment when everything just still developing, then it's very important to find a way to direct or induce those changes you want. So here again, talking about the role of the government, for example, we are actually encouraging consumption in China. At the same time, you see, you have to use those resources or money to direct people for different consumptions and for greener tourism, for example, or direct people to those faraway poorer areas for buying local products, or we call it when we have labor eco products or whatever. And also this week in Beijing, for example, hundreds million yuan was given as shopping coupons for books because we have reading week. So from this weekend, we start another 5-day holiday because around the 1st of May, it's Labor Day. So we have 1 week holiday. So you see everywhere, I remember you talking about advertisements, yeah? So everywhere are trying to give this kind of message that you should consume. So people definitely have a plan to spend more, but we are trying to observe what kind of spending, how different they will be from before. So this is, I don't know, we don't have systematic assessments or any conclusions, but you see really lives become more diverse. So it's not the same as before, but also new things, but this kind of new change with both negative or maybe positive environmental impacts. And also you have to consider as a government when you try to promote green consumption, if that will benefit rural development, for example. So we're trying to find co-control measures to achieve win-win situations. I mean, so these kind of practices are taking place at different levels in communities, in villages, and even at universities, because Valerie said we don't like online education. Yes, nobody liked it. But once it was created, this kind of infrastructure or program were produced, they just stay there. Then you find that can benefit those children far away in those places that don't have access to really qualified teachers, for example, but still they can via internet get similar education programs. So that can be useful in some cases. I don't think they were just gone.
Thank you, Lei. Great discussion. We have 5 more minutes before closing our meeting. Wondering whether there is any other question or comment. Temos mais 5 minutinhos até completar o horário do nosso encontro. Então, gostaria de saber se tem mais alguma pergunta, observação que gostariam de fazer.
I'd like to make a question.
Sure. Vamos, Fabián.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and presenting all those great issues. I'm still curious, Fabián, I'd like to hear your point of view of, like, along with what Eloisa asked, how do you see those trends happening in Brazil? I've been researching some stakeholders from tourism, which is the area which I research, and they're not that optimistic about, like, all those changes and sustainable behaviors and all that. They do not see that. So sometimes I feel like it's more of a hope that we have rather than a real trend. And I'd like to see your point of view on that, since you you have, you know, your research in Brazil too. So please.
Oh, I can say a few words, but
sure.
So so of course I see what's happening in Brazil at this moment in terms of COVID, in terms of right-wing authoritarian government, in terms of the destruction of the Amazon rainforest, etc. So I assume that there will be a huge economic dip and a massive impoverishment. So I can very well imagine that consumption and consumerism is not really on the political agenda, especially because there will of course be a rich class that gets away with it, but they are not going to address this issue at all. So I can very well see, but if you look at it from the perspective of economic recovery, right, something good is to be said about the United States at this moment, that you see a massive investment program in infrastructure, in green infrastructure, and in job creation through all kinds of recovery, not just green recovery, but yeah, one tries to incentivize green developments over non-green developments. And you may hope that if Brazil comes out of this crisis and maybe the president becomes sane again and starts to think about massive investments, that he and maybe even international organizations like OECD and IMF will help him with that, to invest in green infrastructure and create jobs, and at the same time curb greenhouse gas emissions. And I hope that he will stop cutting the rainforest in Amazonia, because that's so important for climate change. So thank you very much for your question.
Now, very quickly, we can, of course, it opens a discussion that can take for 4 hours, and a very stimulating one. But I will stick to the fact that some of those trends that we discuss in the book, and I've been able to present to this particular group network in the past, they still persist. And even those that have waned a little bit, say the crave for less consumption, or for work-life balance, or for going in the direction of what I call mindful consumption, that includes both the health aspect of consumption and the sustainable aspect of consumptions. Even if they have decreased a bit, they still remain as aspirational for several groups in society. And some of the trends are still there. The race in solidarity networks that was mostly a bottom-up phenomenon related to how to protect some vulnerable groups, like the elderly, or people that have a health condition during the lockdown periods, or the way that digitalization has helped to reduce some issues related to mobility, or some issues related to how to work out the work-life balance better. I think those will remain as possibilities, and it won't be defined in the next month. It won't be defined probably once half the population is vaccinated. It will still be open for discussion, and of course the individuals, as much as those that influence the infrastructure and the social norms and the policy packages that that set up the way we live, those will have a tremendous role. Probably the same lack of optimism that maybe you're feeling will have been felt by the North Americans when Trump was still in power, and there you could see how quickly things could be changed under a new leadership. So once Biden took over, so with the proper proportions for Brazil and other countries, I think we can expect something like that if of course a new leadership persuasively raises and take their chances in the near future. So it's 2:02. I would like to thank you very much, all of you, for being here. I have two quick messages before wrapping up our presentations today. One is that I would like to invite all of you to the next activity by one of our key members, Solange, that she will be, as some of you know, be presenting at the WAPOR Latin America chapter. WAPOR stands for World Association for Public Opinion Research, a presentation on food citizenship. That will happen next Tuesday. WAPOR Latin America, mostly it runs in the 3 languages of the region, but most communications are done in Spanish. So the presentation is scheduled for this coming Tuesday, May 4th at 2:30 p.m. Brazil time. So we hope to see you there. And we have a last request. If we could all open our cameras to take a picture, so we have this as also recorded as part of our presentation and the first formal presentation of the book. We will appreciate if you could do that for the picture. So thank you, Silvana. I don't know if someone else can. Oh, great. So okay, I will do the print screen right now. Thank you, Patricia. There you go. So thank you very much again for being with us. Muito obrigado por nos acompanhar nessa apresentação. E os conteúdos serão compartilhados posteriormente. E se não há mais comentários ou dúvidas, gostaria de fechar por aqui, com certeza com aplauso. If there are no more comments or questions, I would like to wrap up with a big applause. Yeah.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
again.
you.
Fabian,
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
And
bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Was a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.